Thank you very much, André, and thank you all for being here. I'm normally pacing, but I've been told firmly to remain on the X, so I'm going to try my best to do that. Thank you all for coming. We're going to move the conversation from pallets to people, so I'm glad to see so many of you remain with us to pick up that conversation. Actually, at a summit that combines robotics and automation with the logistics industry, it's a real pleasure to be here talking about people and about talent, because we're not just going to replace everybody with robots. Sorry to the guys through the other side, we won't replace everybody with robots. It's not possible. But it does change the dynamic of our needs and our challenges from a people perspective, certainly. And it's a very rapidly evolving landscape. So you're obviously here because you care about the topic. I just wanted to begin with an important stat, and this one's from McKinsey. If you look at Deloitte or PwC or speak to any of your CEOs, CFOs, chief supply chain officers, chief people officers, you'll hear similar things. Those businesses that excel at talent management, that excel on the people front, are far more likely to outperform their peers, far more likely to outperform their shareholder expectations. So we can have the nicest technology and automations and robots that we want. If we have no people to execute on the strategy of the business, we won't be going very far. So it's a really important topic. And we wanted to bring this to life. We're going to talk through a success framework shortly. We wanted to bring this to life with a real-world example, a real-world case study. So this is a real business, a €2 billion revenue organization, over 20,000 employees, active in over 30 countries here in Europe, top 5 in their category, touching about 1 billion customers each year. And this is at the back end of the project now. We're at the tail end of the project, but we wanted to bring to life our framework for success through a real life business. So rewind a few months and we have the organization reach out to us. I've described them as challenges here, but they were firmly in the problem category during these first conversations. They were big burning problems that this business was having. And a very real financial strain being put on the organization, profit margins massively squeezed and in a seriously tricky situation from a financial perspective. That was built upon a number of challenges fundamentally, which we'll talk through now. A lack of standardization in tools and processes throughout the organization, in part due to how they'd grown, in part due to not thinking about the topic or future-proofing for this topic, but a lack of standardization in tools and ways of working throughout the organization, combined with low level of tech adoption throughout the business and a very low, maybe they wouldn't mind me saying, even non-existent future-proofing from a tech perspective, combined with a really complex backdrop and environment to be doing this hiring and restructuring in, requiring high levels of confidentiality, high levels of complexity, considering the countries that they operate in, the relative works councils and unions, etc., and different employment laws. Also, structurally, the business is operating in some really high-cost locations. Germany is a huge market for them, and let's face it, not a cheap place to be employing people, and highly manual processes within their organization. And then the final piece to the puzzle, as far as the problems and the challenges are concerned, when they looked internally, a real limited bench of talent, a very small pipeline of succession within the organization, especially considering the earlier topics of future-proofing, tech enablement, standardization of processes, which, as I mentioned, results in them experiencing a real pinch from a financial perspective. So that's the framework. Sort of matches the weather outside a little bit, quite gloomy and grey and a little bit worrying, to be honest with you. So we've worked closely with this client and in working through our success framework. This is the piece that's relevant to anyone who's looking to tackle similar challenges or similarly take over some market share from competitors and ultimately use the talent lever as an important one to pull. So we have a 4-step framework that we run through with our clients, and you can also use this as well within your own organizations. The first step of that is diagnosis. Remember I said looking inwards, and they found that they had a limited bench of talent. So the diagnosis step involves 3 key areas: gap analysis, performance benchmarking, and future-proofing. So the gap analysis process, we support our clients throughout this consultation, looking at ultimately what's the strategy of the organization, What's the structure that needs to be able to be put in place to deliver that strategy? What are the skills required within said structure? And then where are the people gaps to meet those skills requirements? Throughout that process, we can also benchmark the performance versus said skills levels, performance versus the execution on said strategy. And we also look into the future as well. So in some situations, the one I'm describing here, we have a fire burning in the corner. It seems really urgent to put that fire out and solve those problems. But we also encourage our clients to look forward into the future at what the future organization will look like, and thus ensure that they're planning from a skills perspective and a structure perspective to meet those needs as well. Once the diagnosis is done, a lot of reflection, and we've done the gap analysis, the prioritization phase continues. It's not uncommon at this point in time for the list of wants to look very similar to my 10-year-old nephew's Christmas wish list, and it goes on and on and on. And we want this, and we could do this, and we could have that. So there's a very important first step when it comes to the prioritization, which is really categorizing those things that are nice to have and those things that are needs to have. And again, we want to look at that from a skill perspective for the structure that we're looking to achieve to deliver on the strategy. Not, I've seen a great candidate with a great experience and this person could bring so much, and being led by the person, but instead being led by what the actual needs are to deliver on the strategy for the organization. At this point, benchmarking, very important. So we benchmark our talent versus the priority list, versus the wants, versus the needs. We might have people internally who have the capability to do the wants, the nice to haves, but none available to do the needs to have. And it's important to be quite strict with that process as well. And then thirdly, resources. I guess this is a nice way of saying money. Do we have the money and the resource internally to do what we're trying to do? And that might mean we revisit the want and the need list and revisit the priorities again to really drill down to those critical points, those critical needs to deliver the skills in the structure to execute on the strategy. Then the exciting part, attraction. So we've got a clear plan of what we want and where we want it and how we want it. The third step in the framework is attraction, where we look at our go-to-market strategy, our internal capabilities to attract rather than our internal capabilities to do the jobs. And we look at external partners, where conveniently somebody like ourselves may enter the picture. So a go-to-market strategy, in the example I've described, if you remember, there was a high level of confidentiality needed. There was complexity within the organization that meant confidentiality was necessary. That requires this very specific go-to-market strategy. We wouldn't recommend a large booth at an event like this advertising we need to restructure our organization and here's the plan. It wouldn't be appropriate for the circumstances. There are, however, plenty of other where a real bold, loud go-to-market strategy and marketing campaign would be appropriate. So again, it's understanding how do we take our message to market in an appropriate manner. The second point here around internal capability, what is our capability to attract talent? Do we have an internal recruitment team? Do we have an HR department that's also stretched by adding recruitment as a topic, as if it just blends in with the rest of the human resources world? Do we have none of those capabilities? And then, of course, looking at an external partner. And importantly, there are a lot of recruitment agencies and headhunters and personnel writers out there. It's really important to find one that has the right match for the journey that you're on throughout this process, who can understand the story and sell that story. We're in a very, very competitive market, especially in the logistics industry. And I think in the commercial area and sales in logistics is probably the highest demand area and the highest attrition area currently in Europe. So really being clear on how you're going to tell this story and go to market is key. And then fourthly, a critical step of the process and not to be ignored, retention. There's no point in us having the diagnosis, having the triage, having the pain of chopping all of the wants from the list to focus on the needs if we then go and lose everybody afterwards. So a lot of work is spent on our employee value proposition. What do we bring as an employer to you in a whole sea of other employers? Peer analysis, again, looking outside your own organization is critical throughout this process. People think immediately of compensation, and we have an exclusive comp guide available at our desk if you want to visit and see that. Compensation is just one of those things. Am I remunerating people fairly for the role, or are my peers paying them 30% more? expect there to be a challenge, right? Expect there to be a problem. But it's just one of many factors when comparing to those peers. And then the final point, proactivity in revisiting stage one. Don't wait for a fire to start in the corner of the room again that needs putting out, and we're under high pressure and in a tense situation. Proactively doing that gap analysis process, proactively benchmarking our performance internally, and proactively revisiting the future organization is really key throughout. So we've applied this with our client, the 2 billion euro, 20,000 employee organization here in Europe. And these are some of the results we've delivered over a few short months. So 5 operational leaders delivered in 5 different locations. That was sort of the fire being put out immediately. Not easy when you're looking for the same profile in 5 different locations all at the same time, but that was delivered. 9 people hired in total, bringing skills that focus on continuous improvement, digitalization, and communications, and looking at that employee value proposition topic. Managed to do that in getting candidates interviewing in 18 days from being briefed, and having people ready to join the business inside 3 months of getting the project started. A much happier client, now looking at these things as challenges rather than burning problems as they were at the start of the process. So that brings me towards the end of my presentation today. If anyone wasn't familiar with DSJ Global at the start of this, so we're a specialized recruitment agency or headhunter focused on the end-to-end supply chain space. So we recruit throughout procurement, engineering, logistics, commercial solutions, technical operations, and supply chain solutions across all of these different industries. The logistics industry is clearly a huge place where we spend our time. You guys keep us very busy. It's a very dynamic environment for sure. So this is what we're covering as far as our specialisms are concerned. I think André mentioned briefly at the start, so I'm responsible for the European business for DSJ Global. So our teams across London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. We have this same capability on a global basis. So we're active in 14 offices around the world across 3 continents, all delivering these niche talent solutions within the supply chain field. And finally, if you had any questions or you wanted to understand more about the framework or follow up on how we'd apply that in your own organizational setting, you can find us just out here at stand A7. Conveniently next to the cocktail bar. Thank you very much for Forto for sponsoring that, and in front of all the food stands. So we'd be more than happy to discuss that. We do have some exclusive content available here at the event, which is focused on compensation. It always seems to rise to the top of the list of things that people want to talk about. Am I paid well? Am I paying well? And in this space in particular, we've done a bit of a deeper dive into the elements of compensation that are not just the fixed salary, so the compensation of bonuses and variable compensation and commission structures, which in the area of sales within logistics right now, I think it's a hot spot of the highest level of attrition in Europe at the moment across industries, can be or make or break factor on if you're securing the right talent. That's all from me. Thank you very much. If there were any questions throughout, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
There were no questions from the audience, but I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In terms of talent and skills for the future and supply chain,
yes.
Do you see a difference between the different countries in Europe in terms of, let's say, what companies looking for, or you see similarities there?
A lot of things are similar. You know, everyone's facing a world that is becoming more digitalized and more automated and less reliant on manual labor and kind of human intervention. So some of those things remain the same throughout. A huge part of this industry is focused on people and people-to-people interactions, and that's different country to country. So understanding those personal nuances and ways of working and cultural things are always differences that remain throughout. And navigating change, especially around digitalization, and what can be a scary topic. If you work in a very manual environment that's being disrupted by robotics and automation, the soft skills of managing change and transformation are really the ones that rise to the top anyway. And I would say that's consistent throughout. But it's certainly a competitive space to be operating in.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess there are a lot of more questions, and as you said, you are here with a booth, so people can join you and ask your questions, and thank you so much that we had you on stage today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.